Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host and Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. Before we get started, there are a couple of things on my mind. First of all, how's everybody doing there, chat? For one thing, Peter Temple, in his novel Truth, describes a character at one point as having, quote, a head like a glans. Until I laid eyes on Tom Homan, I wasn't really sure what he meant by that. And it's been another fucking week, hasn't it? The Democrats are in full counterinsurgency mode. They propose all these nifty-ass reforms, all these great reforms that actually, there's a law that they want to pass that says that ICE isn't allowed to do anything that they're already not supposed to be allowed to do. And there's another one that gives them surveillance powers that they don't already have. Equips them with body cams, which is something cops have been demanding and that politicians figured out they could sell as an accountability measure, even though it's not one. It's literally not one. It's never actually done that. And in the midst of all of that, I mean, it's hard, when you look at these reforms, I mean, one of the things you should always do when people are talking about this great reform they're going to do about something, is you look for the enforcement mechanism. Who gets to enforce it? What happens if whoever it is, whether it's, ICE or CBP or insurance companies or whatever, if they don't do the thing that the law says they're now supposed to do, or they do the thing that the law now says they're not supposed to do? Is a lot of the time, that is where they get you. Like, for example, in the case of the ACA, there was a lot that was made back in 2009, 2010 about the fact that there was a requirement of a certain medical loss ratio, which, leaving aside the fact that that is a metric that the insurance companies fucking made up so they can make it anything they want, there's another problem. The only enforcement mechanism was that Health and Human Services could ding them if they decided to do so. So it was entirely at the discretion of whatever administration's in power. And it's very similar with these nifty little ICE reforms that Schumer and Jeffries and the rest of those dickheads are now proposing. There's actually a handy 3-letter abbreviation for the enforcement mechanism for these reforms. It's DJT. Because, literally, the enforcement mechanism is if Trump thinks that they ought to be enforced, they'll be enforced. It's his DOJ that enforces that stuff. So, yeah, that's handy. And in the midst of all that, it occurred to me we have a couple of weaknesses in this whole demand to abolish ICE. And I've come up with a way to get around both of them. Both of the main weaknesses. Because, the first weakness, and we've talked about this here before, is, of course, if you abolish ICE, you could, if you wanted to abolish ICE but without changing anything really, you could just rename it, or you could transfer its functions to CBP or whatever. And so, and apart from all that, CBP is much nastier than ICE. They do much worse shit. I mean, the stuff they do on the border, if you want to look up, there are Fault Lines documentaries from Al Jazeera English about the shit the Border Patrol gets up to, their little habit of using people on the Mexican side of the border for target practice, because according to the U.S., nobody has jurisdiction over those killings. The Mexico doesn't have jurisdiction because the trigger was pulled in the U.S., and the U.S. doesn't have jurisdiction because the bullet didn't kill anyone until it got to Mexico. So they just get away with that shit, and they're allowed to, and they do it because they're bored, because it's a boring job. But, so if you, to take all that into account, you'd have to say something like, abolish ICE and CBP without replacement, which is about as catchy and memorable as Vogon poetry recited to the tune of a Cliff Richards song. But fortunately, I figured out how you get around all that shit. You just say no more deportations. That's what we ought to be defending. That's what we ought to be demanding. Just an end to the concept of deportation. Because if you get rid of deportations, if you aren't deporting people, then you don't need deportation cops. It doesn't matter what you call them. These are deportation cops. And if you say no more deportations, if that's the line you draw, then obviously you can just get rid of the people who are in charge of them and just not do them. Homan has the Habsburg underbite, which is also kind of the Homer Simpson underbite, now that you mention it. Tabarnak. Another thing that I was thinking about was, I don't know, you saw the protest at the church because of the ICE director who's a pastor. I mean, a lot of white evangelicals were really pissed off at the idea of protesting in a house of worship. I mean, because, like, Jesus would never do that. He would never, like, kick over tables where people are selling fucking merch in a temple and scream at them and stuff. Like, evangelicals really seem to just hate everything Jesus did. No wonder they're so big on the crucifixions. No wonder they fetishize that. But so the White House, they decided to publish these photos, arrest photos, in particular of terrible with names. What is it? Nikima Levy. And they decided to have a clanker modify those arrest photos. And it's an example, really, of how when somebody lies, they're also kind of giving you some accurate information. Because when the White House decided to publish those AI falsified photos from Minneapolis, they really could have done anything, couldn't they? I mean, the whole point of faking things is to make them look the way you need them to look. If you've abandoned all connection to factual accuracy, and I think it's pretty clear that these people have. I think we can all agree. The sky is basically the limit. Now, if you've been listening to liberal counterinsurgency influencers, you could be forgiven for assuming that what the administration would want to show was protesters with, like, AKs and Yasin 105s and fucking pitched battles and Minneapolis going up in smoke. Maybe the odd Hamas fighter with, like, the wrong color headband, of course, just mixed in for good measure. After all, the line goes, they want us to be resisting and fighting back, taking the bait, so that they can manufacture a pretext to do, you know, the stuff that they're already doing. They want to manufacture a pretext to do the shit that they're actually already doing. That doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense, does it? And yet, that's not what they did. Did they? When they sat down with their trusty little clankers to alter Nikima Levy's arrest photo, they did not give her a gun. They didn't make her look scary or combative, and none of that. They made her cry. In the original photo, she looks composed. She has, like, sort of a slightly raised eyebrow, sort of bemused. And then in the clankerized edition, she's bawling with, like, tears visibly streaking her face. And that is a telling choice. That is a lie that tells us a little bit of truth. To the emotionally constipated target audience of this bullshit, tears signify weakness and defeat. They certainly do not signify a willingness to fight. ICE and the Border Patrol are made of the sort of irredeemable losers who gravitate towards jobs that allow you to enact wanton violence and give you the means to do it, because life has taught them that the only way they're ever going to get respect is if they have a loaded firearm on their hips. And their fan base, which is made up of losers so utterly pathetic that they actually look up to the kind of pieces of shit who brandish a weapon in hopes it'll stop people pointing out what pieces of shit they are even more convinced of this, right? They need it to be like that. Because if being able to do wanton racist violence doesn't get you respect, they might, like, actually have to develop redeeming qualities. ICE and Bortac's national tour has been the definitive refutation of this fundamental article of faith of fascists everywhere. There they are, they're strutting around Minneapolis with their guns at the ready, their imitation tactical vests on, their faces covered, because they're shit scared that their neighbors might find out what they do for a living. All the things that in their worldview engender respect. And there's no respect on offer. Everywhere they go, all they find is ordinary people of all genders and backgrounds telling them what pieces of shit they are and making it clear that their presence will not be tolerated. For all their signifiers of being bad motherfuckers not to be trifled with, all they get in return is people screaming Nazi scum off our streets, blowing whistles, keeping them up at night in their hotels, following them around town to warn their neighbors, and standing up to them at every opportunity. And they do not understand this. Like, if you look at their Twitter, talking about, like, Renee Good or Alex Preddy or whatever, they're mystified by the idea that somebody would lay down their lives for a neighbor or a friend or a comrade. The idea of courage mystifies them. They don't know what that is. They literally don't know what that is. They're so completely unable to understand the concept of bravery that they don't even feel ashamed to say, I don't know what this is. So don't take the counterinsurgency bait, is what I'm saying here. These bastards don't want us to fight them. They want us to grovel. They need us to grovel, so much so that given the total shortage of people willing to grovel to them, they had to fake some photos in order to have at least a little fake groveling to show for their trouble. People's decision to come together and fight back isn't playing into some masterful stratagem of the fascists, no matter what the outside tranquilizers say. It's freaking them out. They can't cope with it, because their entire strategy was to terrorize people into submission. The idea that people would refuse to submit in the face of terror is something they're no more prepared for than George W. Bush and co. were prepared for the eventuality that Iraqis might not meekly submit to occupation. So those were some things that were on my mind.